Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to Hope for Your Heart. This is Pastor Calvin Corbett. So happy to start another week of broadcast. Glad that you are joining us today. And as I record this broadcast, we're just coming off of Mother's Day. And so today I'd like to honor our moms and actually spell out the word mother, where one of the letters from the name mother stands for another reason why we should honor our mothers. Somebody once said that life doesn't come with a manual, it comes with a mother. So many great things have been said about moms, and so one day a year, always the second Sunday of the month, we honor our moms. And so today, as you think about your mom, whether she is still alive or whether she's passed on, you are truly blessed, as Abraham Lincoln said, if you have had a godly mother. And so let's look at this story of mothers and how we can honor them. One day, a little girl was sitting and she was watching her mother do the dishes at the kitchen sink. She noticed that her mother had several strands of white hair that were sticking out in contrast to her brunette head. Why are some of your hairs white, Mom? She asked. Well, her mom replies, well, every time you do something wrong and it makes me unhappy or it makes me cry, one of my hairs turns white. The little girl thought about this for a while and then she asked, well, if that's true, Mom, how come all of Grandma's hairs are white? You think about what moms have invested in our lives. We are truly blessed by having a mom that loved us so much. Now, today, you may be listening and you say, well, I didn't have such a great mom. You know, my mom really didn't love me, didn't care about me, and maybe had a poor example of a godly mom. So I want to encourage you today that the Bible commands us to honor your father and mother. And we do that not because they necessarily deserve it. We do it because we're commanded to do it. And we're going to talk today about why and how we can honor our mothers. And, you know, when you think about honoring your mother, that is the first command that is given that comes with a twofold promise. Did you know by honoring your mother, whether or not she deserves it or not, you are promised two things. Number one, you are promised that your life will go better. Things will go well with you because you've honored your mother. Secondly, you're given long life. Because you honor your mother, God gives you a prosperous life, a good life, and He gives you a long life. It was Ronald Reagan, our 40th president, who said, from my mother, I learned the value of prayer, how to have dreams, and believe I could make them come true. And so we honor our moms today, and we remember all that they have done for us. Now, if you are a parent listening to me today, maybe you're a grandparent, you will identify well with what I'm about to say. Do you remember when you had that first baby and you and your wife were so excited that you would welcome this new child into this world? And in the first baby, whenever there was a sign of distress, there was a whimper or a frown, what did you do? You immediately went and picked up that baby. And then if the Lord blessed you with a baby number two, you'd let that baby cry for a little bit before you would go pick them up. And then you wouldn't pick them up really until they cried so loud that they were going to wake up the firstborn. And then baby number three came along. And by the time baby number three comes along, you're starting to feel worn down. And so you teach your firstborn how to take care of the 3-year-old, right? And how to go put the pacifier in his mouth or how to take care of whatever that little baby needs. Isn't it amazing how things change? And then when you look at even a simple thing like the baby's pacifier. For the first baby, when the pacifier falls on the floor, you pick it up and you put it away. And then when you get home, you boil it, right? And clean it before you give it back to the baby. Well, baby two comes along, and then the pacifier falls on the floor, and you just squirt it off with some juice, maybe from the baby's bottle, and you give it back to the baby, right? By the time baby number three comes along, you take that little pacifier, and you just wipe it off with your shirt, and you pop it back in the baby's mouth. Even how you differentiate, how you change babies from baby one to baby number three, right? Baby number one, you change the baby diaper every hour on the hour, whether it needs to be changed or not. You just do it, right? Then baby two comes along, and maybe every 2 or 3 hours you change the diaper. By the time baby number three comes along, You change the diaper before others start to complain about the smell, or you see it sagging down to their knees. And you think about how things change as you have multiple children, even going out. And I can so identify with this. I remember going out the first time that my wife and I went on a date together, and we had a babysitter for our baby and our oldest. And the first time you go out, you call the babysitter 5 times, and just to make sure everything's okay at home. And then when baby 2 comes along, just before you walk out the door, you say, oh, I better give them my cell phone number so they can call me. And then by the time baby number 3 comes along, you leave very explicit instructions for the sitter. Only call me if you see blood. Isn't it amazing how that changes, right? And then when you get home with baby number 1, you spend a good part of every day just gazing at the baby. And by the time baby number 2 comes along, you spend a good part every day just watching to be sure that your older children isn't squeezing, poking, or hitting the baby. By the time baby number 3 comes along, you spend a little bit of every day hiding from your children. And I was convinced that my wife would sometimes hide in the bathroom to get a break from the children, okay? Especially by the time baby 4 and baby 5 comes along. Well, you think about the mom's influence, and I am so thankful for a godly mom who still is alive, still doing well at 84 years old. And what a blessing it is to have a godly influence and a godly influence of our moms. And I think moms teach us so many things, and many things that we learn from moms, we don't even, realize we've learned it from them. We kind of have learned it intuitively from them. One day, a young boy was telling his pastor that his mother said his prayers for him each and every night. Well, the pastor was so moved by that and says, well, what do you mean that your mom says your prayers for you? And the young guy replied, well, when mom tucks me in, she always says the same prayer. And the prayer is, thank God he's finally in bed. And so when we think about the amazing influence that moms have had, it's a great privilege and a great responsibility to be a mother. No one has more profound or more of an enduring influence upon those around them than a mother raising her children in the fear and the wisdom of the Lord. I remember when we started having our children, my wife and I, we waited a couple years before we started having children. We were both, I was in seminary and she was finishing up her undergrad degree when we got married. And so we decided to wait a couple of years to have children. And we really prayed about how we would have these children and what we would do. And we were both convinced that as long as our children were young, until they started school, that my wife would be a stay-at-home mom and full-time spend with our kids, full-time involved in helping around the affairs of the home, and then helping around even the affairs of the ministry. And so for the first 12 years of having children, I guess my wife was a full-time homemaker, did an amazing job with our kids. As a matter of fact, I believe one of the reasons that we are blessed with such wonderful adult children is because we heavily influenced them by having Sherry stay at home with them when they were just really young. And then she went into teaching after they started going into the school. But, that investment, it was a major investment for us financially. And as our kids were coming along, it really put a kink on our finances. But, we trusted the Lord. And, the Lord is faithful. I can promise you that when you do God's work, God's way, you never lack God's resources. I think about the Apostle Paul. Paul referred to Timothy as being faithful in the Lord. Now, Timothy's faith, it wasn't just a mere, like a dry creed. It was no mere outward show of piety. He didn't just do church for the appearance sake. His faith in the risen Christ could endure all kinds of persecution, all kinds of suffering of loss. He could live or die for the sake of Christ with the sure hope of eternal life. Paul had the highest confidence in Timothy's fine track record as a Christian worker. As a matter of fact, in Philippians chapter 2, Paul writes, you know that Timothy has proven himself. You see, Paul saw a firm foundation in Timothy's life, and it even explains where that firm foundation came. He says in 2 Timothy 1:5, I have been reminded of your sincere faith, referring to Timothy, which I first saw lived out in your grandmother Lois, and then in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives also in you. Now, Timothy's grandmother and mother were staunch believers who had taught him the scriptures from the earliest years of childhood. So Paul exhorts Timothy, you've been given a wonderful legacy, Timothy, with a godly grandmother and a godly mother. Now, Timothy, continue in what you have learned and become convinced of it, because you know these from whom you have learned it. What was Paul reminding Timothy of? Paul is telling Timothy, you have been given such a tremendous gift. Now live out this gift. Remember where it came from. One of the core elements that will keep a family together is the spiritual connection. And as you're passing that spiritual legacy on down to your children, you're going to discover something. You're going to discover that they will pass that faith along. Somebody once said that you're not going to really know how good you did as a parent until you start having grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That is a proof of whether or not there is a deep, abiding faith within you. So motherhood, it's the ultimate reward, but motherhood is also the ultimate sacrifice, all in the same breath. There's a whole chapter in the Bible, Proverbs 31, that deals with motherhood, right? And a godly lady. Proverbs 31:20 says, charm is deceitful, beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord, she is to be praised. What a blessing it is to be able to praise that woman who fears the Lord. Now, when you think about mothers, how often Christian mothers have been used of God to raise godly sons for the ministry of God's church. And now, if you've turned out well, it is in part due to a godly mother, the influence that she has had upon your life. Every year in the United States, there's 140 million babies born. Today, just today, more than 350,000 babies are born. And when we look at the rate of births, we can discover that it's been fairly constant for the last 50 years. So based upon it continuing in this way, it is estimated that from the year 2020 to 2070, in that 50-year time frame, that if we go at this particular rate, our population will almost double, right, in the next 50 years. So when you think about it, a lot of new babies are coming into the world. And so let's spend just a moment thanking the Lord for our godly mothers. And let's look at reasons why we should give them honor and give them praise. And we're going to spell out the word mothers, okay? For the letter M. I thank the Lord for my mother because of the mouth of encouragement that she always had. Proverbs 31 says, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household. She doesn't eat the bread of idleness. So from this passage, we discover that whenever a godly mother speaks, she opens her mouth and out comes wisdom. The teaching of kindness is on her tongue. In other words, she knows just what to say, when to say it, how to say it. And she's not just a woman of words, she is also very industrious. She looks well on the ways of her household. She doesn't eat the bread of idleness. Now, I remember when my children were coming along and they would play ball and I would coach them. And I remember one time my oldest was out there and he had been playing ball for a few years. And at this stage of the game, I was watching him from the stands and he went down, he struck out. And he didn't even swing at the last pitch that was called the strike. And I remember yelling out at him and said, man, how could you miss that one, Tyler? It was a perfect pitch right down the middle. You didn't even swing. And then Sherry chimes in and she says, "That's okay, buddy. Don't worry about it. You're doing great. You're the best." What a different approach from the mom to the dad. And when you think about that, my son just struck out, but mom said, "That's great." You know, a word of encouragement during a time of failure is worth more than an hour of praise after success. Let me repeat that. A word of encouragement during a failure is worth more than an hour of praise after success. You know, when somebody has a big, huge success, right? Yeah, you encourage them, you bless them, and you celebrate with them. But the success that they've earned is really praise enough. It's when they're discouraged, when they fail, that they really need a lot of encouragement. You know, the heart of the righteous weighs its answer, but the mouth of the wicked gushes evil. So a righteous mom will weigh their answer. A righteous dad will do the same thing. Peter says, "Whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech." You know, when my kids were coming along, sometimes they would use language that was not appropriate. Sometimes they would use words that were not appropriate. And so I came up with a wonderful way to help my children overcome the use of bad words. I would make them memorize Ephesians 4:29. "Let no corrupt talk proceed out of your mouths, but only words that are good for building up as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." You know, when you think about a godly mom, they know how to encourage. Or sometimes they have to get in our grill, and sometimes they have to speak the truth in love, but it's not a corrupting speech. It's not something that is tearing down. It is something that is building up. Paul says, as it fits the occasion. And our mouth should be always seasoned, our speech seasoned with grace. When you think about that, James reminds us, James 3:10, "From the same mouth come blessings and cursings. My brothers, these things ought not to be so." In other words, our mouth should not be both blessing and cursing. Our mouth should be constantly blessing. In Psalm 141, David cried out to the Lord and said, "Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips." You see, David knew the power of his tongue, and he asked the Lord to protect his mouth, to put a guard over his mouth. So we praise and honor our mothers for the mouths in which they really encouraged us. Secondly, we thank our moms for the opportunity of life. It was Kelly Fisher who said, "Strange as it may sound, one overpowering new feeling I had when I had my first child was, wow, so this is how much my mom loves me." My love for my own child was so visceral. It made me appreciate my own mom so much more. When you think about the love you have for your children, it gives you a glimpse as to how much your mom loved you. And it gave you that opportunity for life. You know, children are a heritage from the Lord. Psalm 127, verse number 3. And I tell my kids often, I said, I've tried to take really good care of all 5 of you kids and to try to protect you and provide for you and give you godly example and godly instruction. And I said, now, the reason I have invested so heavily in you is because when I get older, I want you to make sure that you pick out a really good nursing home for me if I get to the point where I have to be in a nursing home. But children are a blessing from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Children are not a curse, they're a blessing. When you think about the influence of a mom, especially on religious matters and on spiritual matters, did you know that George Barner recently did a report in which he reported that 6 in 10 practicing Christians, 60% of Christians in the United States today, say they came to faith because of the influence of a believer in their household where they grew up. 68% of those said it was the mom's faith that influenced them. It does make a difference. We learn from Proverbs 14:27, the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of death. Your mom gave you a wonderful opportunity to be involved in life, to enjoy life. Did you know that God began to rewire your mom's brain when she was expecting you? Even before a woman gives birth, pregnancy tinkers with the very structure of a mom's brain. After centuries of observing behavioral changes in new mothers, scientists are only now beginning to define and discover the link between a way a woman acts and what happens to her, and how her brain actually is beginning to be rewired as she is experiencing pregnancy. Her prefrontal cortex, the midbrain, and the lobes and elsewhere is beginning to change. Gray matter becomes more concentrated. Activity increases in the regions of the brain that control empathy, anxiety, and social interaction. You see, on the most basic level, these changes prompted by a flood of hormones during pregnancy and in the postpartum period help attract a new mother to her baby. In other words, these maternal feelings of overwhelming love, that fierce protectiveness, and that constant worry begin with reactions in the brain. Isn't it amazing how God does that? He knows moms are going to need extra empathy, extra love when they bring a baby into the world, and so God begins to rewire their brain. So hats off to our moms today. It was Winston Churchill who said, if you're going through hell, keep on going. Maybe you've got young ones and they're in your feet and you're getting tripped up over them, and you're wondering how in the world I'm going to keep on going on. Well, just keep on going, right? I'm here to let you know that grandchildren are the reward that you receive for not killing your children. So hang in there, ladies. It will get better, right? If you're experiencing sleepless nights because the baby's up all night, hang in there. It will change. We honor you because you gave us this amazing opportunity to have life. Well, there's a third reason why we honor our mothers, and that is because of the thoughts of wisdom they have. Proverbs 14:1 says, "The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down." It was Mark Twain who wrote, "What a wee little part of a person's life are his acts and his words. His real life is led in his head and is known to none but himself. All day long, the mill of his brain is grinding. His thoughts, not those other things, are his history." So today we thank you, Mom, for thinking wise thoughts and building your house on the thoughts of God's Word. We thank you that the way you process things has helped us to mature. And so we take a moment and we praise you. Well, my time is just about up for this day's broadcast. And so I want to encourage you to join me tomorrow for the second half of this message as to why we should honor mothers. In the closing minute that I have, I want to remind you that Hickory Ridge Community Church has an amazing ministry to students, to children from 6 weeks old all the way up to 5th grade. Now, if you're interested in enrolling your child or your grandchild in Hickory Ridge Academy, would you give us a call at 757-421-7500? We'll be happy to share with you all the amazing things that are happening through Hickory Ridge Academy. We're so excited this fall to be offering school going up through the 5th grade. We'd love to have your kids come, and our motto is, if you attend today, you'll achieve tomorrow. So why don't you come get some information, take a tour of the school, and check it out and see if that's a good fit for your student today. I also want you to know that We are a church that believes in the power of prayer, and we would love to pray for you. Every Thursday morning, I have a team on a conference call, usually about 15 or 18 people that pray. If you have something you'd like us to pray for over, would you shoot me a text message at 252-267-2365. Thank you so much for listening today. If you'd like to hear this broadcast again, you can have a free download at buzzsprout.com/1890557, or you can listen on Amazon, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast.
Hickory Ridge Community Church is located at 3320 Battlefield Boulevard South in Chesapeake, Virginia. Sunday service times are 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. We'd love for you to join us. For more information, go to hrcc7.org. And remember, no matter what you're going through, in Jesus Christ there is always hope for your heart.